might be under the impression that it is time to call it quits in your garden during the winter, but you are likely mistaken. If you're living in Florida and subtropical climates similar to ours, you are in prime planting season. So today we are going to be talking about 12 different crops that absolutely thrive in our cooler months. The first stop in our 12 crops to plant in December is lettuce. I mean, you can't really go wrong. It's a fan favorite and almost everybody loves a good salad. But all salad or all lettuce is not created equal. Now, if you're a beginner gardener, I highly recommend that you choose a loose leaf type lettuce. They are much easier for most home growers to deal with. It gives you a nice manageable regular harvest as opposed to the head lettuce, which is larger and tends to be a little bit more challenging to grow. As you may have figured out by growing in the past, lettuce does not like temperature swings. Obviously, here in Florida, it is very rare for us to get a consistent cool spell that lasts more than a few days. We're lucky if it lasts a few weeks. So we have to be incredibly mindful when we're selecting which types of lettuce to grow. We need ones that say something along the lines of bolt tolerant or warm weather germination. A lot of lettuce won't even germinate in soil temps above 85 degrees. So if you're starting it in fall or perhaps in December, you may not even see temperatures cool enough for that soil to germinate them. And that is why I created the Florida lettuce blend. It is all loose leaf varieties of lettuce that can deal with the temperature swings and are better acclimated to growing in our warm soil temperatures. If you haven't checked out my seed shop, we do have a curated collection of seeds that go over all of the different crops we're going to be talking about in today's video, as well as some other amazing varieties. This next crop is one that I actually very, very rarely plant, or at least used to, but now it's my daughter's favorite vegetable. So guess what we're going to be growing more of? That's broccoli. But I am a firm believer in picking the right variety of any vegetable. Broccoli is one of those. It doesn't like the swings in temperatures that we get here in Florida. The broccoli heads don't form up too well, which is why I was really excited when I found Piracicaba broccoli. It is a broccoli that they sourced or found in Brazil, and it is a lot more heat tolerant than some of our other broccoli varieties. Now, just because it's a different variety doesn't mean you're going to notice much of a difference aside from it not bolting and flowering right away. This looks, tastes, and grows just like your standard issue broccoli. Waltham is another well-known variety. So for all intents and purposes, exactly the same as you're used to, just better heat tolerance. This one is one that I started originally growing for my grandmother. It was one of her favorite leafy greens and something she said she could only find up north. But it grows totally fine here, and especially once I figured out the variety situation, it does spectacular and is one of the greens that I rely on all the way through till spring. And that is Swiss chard. Now, it is a relative of the beet, believe it or not. We're just eating the greens instead of the root. And I started by growing rainbow chard, which does grow okay here, but I'd always have some die off. And then I started growing Ford Hook Swiss chard, and that did amazing. Giant leaves, thick stems that you could use like a celery substitute, and it did great, but it was also massive, and I didn't always need that much leafy green or have the space available. And that is when I finally found my favorite variety of Swiss chard, which is perpetual chard. It's also known as perpetual spinach, although they call so many things spinach and none of them actually are. But that being said, it is very spinach-like looking in the leaves, especially once you take the stem off. Now, perpetual chard is a nice container option, and it also has a thinner stalk, so if you're only looking for the leafy greens and you don't really want that thick ribbed stalk, the perpetual chard's an excellent choice. Now, because it's a beet and in that same family, when you put your seeds into the soil, you will see that you'll have multiple plants germinate, even if you only put one seed. That's because the seed is actually coated in all different little boxes that contain the seed itself. So when we plant one seed, we're actually planting a lot of seeds. So do make sure to thin it down to one plant so that you get the most vigorous growth. Now this can handle our cool winter months as well as our warmer ones. If you do plan on keeping it through into late spring, I would try to place it somewhere that's going to have a little bit of afternoon shade so that you get the longest harvest season possible. I've been completely self-sufficient on leafy greens here on my urban homestead or micro homestead for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years now. We literally haven't purchased leafy greens and we grow them year round. And if I had to only choose one leafy green to grow, although I would not want to, it would be Veggies. Now I know it's kind of a crazy name, a little hard to pronounce, definitely hard to spell, but believe me, this one is worth it. It is a mix between tatsoi and kamatsuna. So tatsoi is one that you will normally see in those boxed lettuce mixes at the grocery stores and stuff. They sell it as spinach. You never even know you're eating anything but spinach. That's how similar in taste it is. But this one is an improvement on that tatsoi. It is more pest resistant, better at temperature swings, and I have found that it just lasts longer into the spring months. I grow Veggies at least 6 months out of the year, which is pretty impressive for something that is spinach-like. The traditional Bloomsdale spinach does not do well here. Don't even bother. If you're a spinach fan, make sure to plant Veggies. You will not regret it. And on top of that, it is oxalate free. So spinach and Swiss chard and some of the other leafy greens can have a higher oxalate content. So if your family or friends are sensitive to that, this is definitely the plant to grow. Veggies' companion is right over here, and that is kale. A lot of people love to consume kale, typically cooked more so than raw, although this one can swing either way. You'll see in like books and all of those extreme northern gardeners, they'll grow kale in hoop houses and such all the way through winter. This is definitely a cold tolerant plant, which is why it does perfectly fine, if not better, in our winter months. This is one you do not have to cover. It will easily take whatever frosts we get here in Florida in our subtropical climate. I have found that red Russian kale or premier kale grow really well here, but I'm just personally not a fan of the kind of almost prickles on the leaves. Lacinato kale, on the other hand, also known as dinosaur kale, does technically have a little bit of a tougher leaf to it, but I just personally prefer the taste and the way that you prepare this a lot better than your other Siberian type kales. So I'll find a lot of people in spring will rip out their kale thinking this is a cool weather crop, and while on a technicality it is, the lacinato in particular last really far into the spring, and if planted appropriately in December now or in the fall with some afternoon shade, this is possible to grow all the way through the year. This one is also known as like a kale palm tree. And it's kind of fun because they are harvested from the bottom up, and so you're pulling off the leaves, and eventually what you end up with is this giant kind of like wobbly stalk with this like poof of leaves at the top, which reminds a lot of people of palm trees. So we are back at the green stalk. I always try to plant one of them in salad greens, just for easier harvesting. That way, if a friend or a family member is over helping prep dinner, everything on there is good for a salad. And this one is an interesting pick. It's technically in the mustard family, but don't let it scare you off. They have selected for an incredibly mild flavor and a very tender leaf. I put this into all of my salad blends, and it blends and melds lovely with the lettuces and all of the other leafy greens that I toss in there. Now this crop is called Mizuna, and it is an Asian leafy green that is frilly leafed and honestly grows better than lettuce here. It is incredibly delicious and nutritious, so I highly recommend, even if you're not a fan of mustard, to give this one a try. If I had to compare it to something, I would kind of say it's like a toned down arugula. It's not quite as peppery, it's more mustardy flavored, but not even as sharp and pungent as arugula. Give Mizuna a try, and I think you will be incredibly surprised. I may not be a big fan of growing broccoli, but I am a big fan of growing cabbage. Now, cabbage is so versatile. You can use it for the traditional coleslaw, of course, but I love to make kimchi. So in all of my winter gardens, I will usually have a kimchi bed, which has all sorts of delicious daikon radishes and lots of cabbage. Now, there's green cabbage, there's red cabbage. Taste-wise, obviously not much different, but my personal favorite, just for like stunning beauty in the garden and huge conical heads, is Calibos cabbage. Now, Calibos cabbage is one that I started trying out 5 years ago or so, and it's my favorite ever since. The foliage as it grows in is just stunningly beautiful, with purple veins, and then you get the mist on it in the morning. Just gorgeous. You literally could plant this in a garden strictly for beauty and not for food. Now, Calibos does take a little bit longer than some of the others like Early Jersey or Red Acre, but you get a larger head out of the cabbage as well, so I think it is definitely worth the wait. A lot of beginner gardener books will talk about like some of the easiest crops to grow, the most likely to succeed from seed, and almost always they recommend radish. And yes, it is easy to start from seed sometimes, but it's not like a gimme in my personal opinion. If you've ever tried to grow radish before and you end up with like long stringy roots that never form a bulb, or if you grow it and they are the spiciest things, it's more of conditions than anything. So when you plant radishes, it is a really good idea, one, to plant them in our cooler months. They are not a warm weather crop here. And the next thing is that they stay evenly moist. Having even, consistent moisture really helps with a solid root formation. Green stalks work well for that. Nice, rich soil, even watering, goes through the top, waters each tier. I do like it here. I'll grow them in my raised beds as well, but especially like the smaller breakfast type radishes, they do incredibly well in this system. Now, the easiest variety that I've found to grow well and do consistent root formation has been the French breakfast radish. It's not your traditional like scarlet globe round ones. They're more of like en blanc, more pencil-like. They seem to set their roots and form up their roots better than some of the other varieties that isn't overly spicy. The other word of caution with planting radishes is to make sure you thin them out. It is critical for proper root formation. If you're not sure how to thin things out, I do have a video on that. I'll link it down below. This one, on a technicality, is food. It's edible. You can put it into salads and such, but the primary reason that I grow this one is for medicine. Now, it is known as pot marigolds because they're often grown in containers or pots, but it is not a French or African marigold like you might be familiar with in the vegetable garden. It has no nematode resistant properties. It's not going to help your tomatoes grow bigger. But the flower is quite similar, beautiful, vibrant yellow, sometimes oranges or reds depending on the variety. But the type that I grow is called Calendula resina because it has the highest resin content for use in medicines. Now, this is very easy to grow, next to no pest pressure, draws in the pollinators just like most flowers will. But I use the petals for things like salves. A lot of people will use it for face creams. You can use it as essentially an antibiotic ointment to help heal scrapes and cuts on your skin. It's a very useful plant. in addition to helping with the pollinators and even being a beautiful cut flower for a vase. So very versatile, and although it is not one of your traditional vegetables that you'll be preparing on a regular basis in the kitchen, I think it definitely deserves a spot in everyone's garden. This one is highly underrated and is something that I think a lot of us might be less familiar with cooking, but it's not at all difficult and it's quite productive. One, you can harvest the leafy greens while it's growing and then give it a little time and you get to harvest the root. This is for turnips, which is something that is widely grown in the southeastern United States for good reason. It doesn't get much pests, it can take our sandier soils, and it can take our swings in temperature. Now, out of all of the turnip varieties, I really strongly enjoy or prefer the white egg turnip. They're smaller in size, they don't get quite as big as the purple top, but they're much more mild in flavor. Purple top, which is a little bit of a larger variety, can get like a little bit of a thicker skin, which I find that the white egg doesn't get. And so I think it's a lot easier for people to use and cook with and be familiar with and enjoy. So they're about the size of a radish, like a round radish. Delicious, roasted with other root vegetables. I will oftentimes throw mine in with my carrots and beets, and just mix it all together, chopped up with a little oil, salt, and pepper, and you are good to go. I went to a permaculture convergence, and Seed the Stars, which is an awesome seed company here in Florida, they were doing this presentation on different kinds of brassicas and how this one wild plant was saved and harvested and turned into so many different things. All of them are all from the same plant. We're just eating different parts of that plant or at different life stages. Pretty amazing that that one thing can turn into so many different food items. Well, this is going to be our third brassica for 12 Things to Plant in December, and that is going to be kohlrabi, which is definitely one of the lesser known brassica plants, I think. And this time we're not going to be eating the leaves or the flowers, we're going to be eating the stem of the plant. What they've basically selected for over time is a nice fat tennis ball-ish sized stem that gets nice and round and plump, and it has the delicious taste of broccoli, that like kind of sweet, kind of savory taste that you get, but in stem form, so it holds up really well to sautés and to cooking. And another bonus is that the leaves are absolutely delicious when picked young, in salads, or mature sautéed. So very versatile plant, easy to grow, produces quite quickly compared to something like cabbage or cauliflower or broccoli. And this is also one you can easily grow in containers. So no matter whether you're in a large space raised bed or a small space container garden, kohlrabi will very likely be able to find a home in your garden. To wrap up our 12 crops to start in December, we are going to be ending with a root crop. Now, as you may know, soil in Florida, not that great. More often than not, we're going to be growing in containers or raised bed gardens, which gives us a little bit of a different soil structure than most of the country when we're planting. And so by that default, we can have some differences or challenges when it comes to root crops. Most beds, although my Hopkins hidden homestead beds are plenty deep enough, a lot of raised bed gardens aren't overly deep, and underneath them is going to be some sort of weed blocker or sheet mulch or something that's not all that favorable for plants. So when you are planting carrots, you need to make sure that you're picking half-long varieties. So the super mega long ones that you'll see on Instagram or whatever, where someone's holding up a carrot that's like half the size of them, not gonna fly here in Florida. The carrot we see when we pull it out of the ground is the part that we eat, but there's a taproot, a hair-thin taproot that goes below that, that's almost the size of the carrot itself. So if we have an 8-inch raised bed and we're trying to grow a carrot that's supposed to be, 12 inches or better, it's probably not going to do well because that taproot hits the bottom of the raised bed, hits the bottom of the container, and it doesn't know what to do, it'll lead to scraggly growth or no growth at all. So half long means they're going to be shorter in stature, and that is definitely kind of carrot that we're going to be wanting to grow here in Florida. One of my favorites is Chantenay Red Core, but there's other ones like Danvers or Scarlet Nantes. They all do good. The key factor here is making sure that they're one of the shorter type carrots. So carrots can be a little tricky to grow, even taking into consideration the half-long variety, and that is why I have these boards in my garden bed. There's a lot of tips and tricks that will help you to get a successful carrot harvest. So if you are into growing carrots and haven't done as well as you've expected in the past, make sure to check out this video next on all of my tips and tricks for growing carrots.